Hello there friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan. So, how was the Galactic Republic able to essentially absorb so many different types of government systems into one larger party? Well, it's pretty simple actually, and it's kind of cool. At the federal level, the Galactic Republic was a representative democracy. You had things like the Galactic Senate, which had elected representatives from all of the different worlds. But at the local level, there were no laws that said that you had to have a certain type of government. Even a non-democratic government was pretty much fine as long as you obeyed the constitutions and the galactic laws. And so at the local planetary level, you had all sorts of crazy governments, ranging from corpo states to hive minds, tribal confederacies, and you had a surprisingly high number of monarchies with kings and queens as their heads of state. Now, many of these governments didn't operate with an absolute monarchy. You had like constitutional monarchies or parliamentary monarchies, which meant that the king or queen didn't have complete control over the process. They had to share power, there were checks and balances in place. And some of these kings and queens were even elected. But generally speaking, these were legitimate heads of states. They weren't just ceremonial positions, kind of like what you see with some monarchs here on Earth. The only difference between these monarchs and other heads of states, like the various chancellors, presidents, or prime ministers, is the royal designation that comes with their position. Well, what is royalty? Royalty separates you from the common folks. It elevates you to a higher status. You're untouchable, and therefore, well, hopefully, your judgment is also better than most people. In our real world, even ceremonial sovereigns like the late king of Thailand enjoys a godlike status and protections in his country. For instance, if you're ever visiting Thailand, don't disrespect the king. Like, don't make funny pictures in front of his large portraits that you can see everywhere. You could possibly go to jail, and for a really long time, even if you are a pharaoh. And I think this is a major misstep for more of these liberalized monarchies with power sharing in its legal framework. You're still falsely attributing excellence and grace to what essentially is a normal human being who just happens to have a royal designation, which truly means nothing. Which isn't really democratic in nature. It's a vestige of the old way of rule, when leaders claim to be appointed by the divine or some otherworldly power. Now, in the Star Wars universe, there have been plenty of monarchs who are actually pretty decent and well-meaning people and loved by their constituents, but no amount of grace or dignity could really help them steer their people away from disaster. And so these next 5 monarchs are kind of a cautionary tale about this form of political system. Li Char was the 83rd king of Mon Cala. He was still an adolescent when his father's assassination propelled him into the leadership position. He inherited his position through his royal bloodline, and needless to say, this young boy was completely unprepared for the situation he was about to face. The watery world of Mon Cala has always been shared by 2 sentient species, the surface-dwelling Mon Calamari and the Corans, who built their cities on the ocean floor. The Mon Calamari were much better connected to the outside world, and they were also famous for their shipyards. The Corans, on the other hand, were isolationists and xenophobic in nature, and they focused more on deep-sea mining. Now, despite the differences between these 2 species, for most of their history, the Corans and Mon Cala were able to peacefully share power on the planet. Generally, what you had was a Mon Cala king or queen, and then you had a Coran advisor that would basically handle a lot of the day-to-day issues on the planet. The death of King Li Char's father was secretly orchestrated by a separatist agent and was designed to create a power vacuum on the planet. Meanwhile, separatist money was being funneled into the Coran Isolation League, which wanted to break free from this power-sharing arrangement that has kept the planet stable for many years. They essentially wanted a Coran to become king of the planet now. This is just one of many separatist operations in the Outer Rim to destabilize either neutral or Republic-aligned worlds. King Li Char would bravely try to lead the fight against the separatist-backed Coran movement, but really it was the veteran captain of the Mon Calamari Guard, Gal Akbar, who would lead his forces. You also had the support of Republic envoys leading a clone quick reaction force, along with a huge number of Gungan warriors, who were all crucial in helping King Li Char maintain control of his planet and lead his people to victory. But following the Clone Wars, King Li Char made a very crucial mistake. He secretly took on a Jedi advisor known as Farron Bar. He was a Padawan, and he had escaped Order 66 and was now essentially a fugitive on the run. At the time, the Galactic Empire was basically carrying out a massive militarization project, and this required a lot of resources and production capabilities, and Mon Cala was a planet with both of those things. An Imperial envoy was sent to negotiate a trade deal with Li Char. The terms weren't really great, and the Imperial ambassador would be rebuked, but on his way back to his ship, his shuttle would get destroyed in a fiery explosion. This immediately gives the Empire an option to launch a full-on invasion on this planet. One would imagine that it was the Empire who carried out this false flag attack. But no, instead it was the Jedi Padawan Farron Bar who was advising King Li Char. He had orchestrated a trap on the planet for the Sith Lord Darth Vader. Bar had carried out the attack on the Imperial emissary because he knew that Darth Vader, the Emperor's enforcer, would arrive on the planet to figure out what was going on. Farron Bar had been blinded by his desire for revenge, and King Li Char doomed his entire planet by trusting him. Farron Bar and the Mon Cala would eventually be defeated by Darth Vader's forces, and the planet would lay in ruins as a result. King Li Char would be arrested and kept in essentially a stasis pod for the rest of his short life. King Li Char was a very well-intentioned individual. He was wise in his own way, and he was a very honorable leader, but he was completely out of his depth when he was pushed into the leadership position, not because of merit or his experience, but because he was in the royal bloodline. Let this be a cautionary tale of pushing basically young people who aren't ready to rule into positions of power. Bail Organa was perhaps one of the most important figures in the early rebellion. His quick actions post-Order 66 resulted in him saving two very important members of the Jedi Order, Grandmaster Yoda and Master Obi-Wan Kenobi. It was on his ship, the Tantive 4, that plans to hide the Skywalker twins on Tatooine and Alderaan were made. And directly after that, Bail Organa began creating the backbone of the organization that one day would be known as the Rebel Alliance. The only problem here is that Bail Organa already had significant responsibilities to the Alderaanian people. You see, as the Queen's consort, viceroy, and representative for Alderaan in the Imperial Senate, Bail Organa had full access to the Alderaanian treasury and security forces, and he made full use of his own diplomatic immunity to quietly create, fund, and arm rebel cells all across the galaxy. Although the cause of his rebellion was righteous, the Alderaanian people never really had a say in what exactly he was doing, and by using official Alderaanian ships, personnel to carry out these very rebellious activities, he was placing the entire planet in grave danger. As a result of Bail Organa's actions against the Empire, Wilhelm Tarkin would use the Death Star to destroy the planet. He accused the Alderaanian people of harboring terrorists and hiding weapon caches all across the planet. These accusations were most likely accurate, and so Bail Organa, despite all of his good intentions and his heroic efforts to save the galaxy from tyranny, doomed his own people as a result. Ramses Dendup came from a royal family and would become the king of Onderon in 22 BBY, right as the Clone Wars erupted in the Outer Rim. Onderon was historically aligned with the Republic, but King Dendup took a non-aligned approach during the conflict. He didn't trust the Confederacy of Advanced Systems, but he also recognized that the Outer Rim territories had legitimate grievances against the Republic.
I was faced with a difficult choice: to join the Republic or the Confederacy. Both are corrupt, but I had to pick a side before one was chosen for me. Except I chose neither.
And so Ramses Dendup decides to stay out of the conflict, thinking that it would spare his people from additional suffering and destruction. Instead, the opposite would happen. Opposition leader Sanjay Rash, with the support of the Separatist Alliance, would overthrow the monarch and appoint himself King of Onderon. This led to supporters of King Ramses Dendup to form an underground liberation movement, which eventually led to a bloody civil war that became just another proxy conflict in the wider Clone Wars. Had Dendup stayed loyal to the Republic and asked for military and political assistance from the GAR, I think it's very likely that the CIS would have left Onderon alone. The best deterrence sometimes is just a show of force. Padme Amidala was elected Queen of Naboo at the young age of 14, and while she was incredibly capable for someone her age, she found herself completely out of depth when the Trade Federation blockaded her planet in response to the Republic's reform on the Free Trade Zone. Padme Amidala, however, was a fighter and had a strong spirit. She would ally the Naboo with their Gungan neighbors and waged a very successful campaign to kick the Trade Federation off of their planet. She was, however, very easy to manipulate on the political realm because of her lack of experience, especially in Coruscanti politics. Early on in the blockade, Senator Sheev Palpatine, the representative from Naboo, had advised the Queen to address the Senate and plead for a Republic intervention that he knew wasn't going to happen. Instead, what happens is the Chancellor of the Republic, Finis Valorum, promises to create a subcommittee that would investigate her claims before even telling her what he would do to solve this blockade situation. Meanwhile, Padme's people are suffering heavily from this occupation. Sheev Palpatine, who understood the bureaucratic mess that the Republic Senate was, used this opportunity to convince Padme to make a call for no confidence in the Chancellor. This would result in the removal of Finis Valorum, a well-meaning but incompetent Republic ruler, and that would lead to the ascension of surprise Sheev Palpatine as Supreme Chancellor. Sheev Palpatine would go on to establish his own new empire, and he would also corrupt Padme's husband, turning him to the dark side. He also potentially exploded her heart using the Force while she was pregnant, but that's just speculation. Years later, after Palpatine's death, his contingency plan, which involved Operation Cinder, would target Naboo with weather satellites that were designed to wipe all life off of the planet. Satine Kryze was the leader of the new Mandalorian political movement. She had fought a brutal civil war against the Death Watch traditionalist faction. When she won, she basically appointed herself ruler of Mandalore, the Duchess. Ironically, the thing she was fighting for was a more demilitarized and pacifist Mandalorian society, one that was focused more on cultural, social, and economic growth rather than military expansion. During the Clone Wars, Satine Kryze would lead the Council of Neutral Systems. This was a political movement made up of 1,000 different planets that were all non-aligned and wanted to stay out of the Clone Wars. This council had no real political power or military capabilities to back up their neutrality, and since the Clone Wars was essentially a fake war orchestrated by Darth Sidious, anti-war activists like Satine Kryze would be targeted by the Sith and their many agents. First, Count Dooku would coax Satine's old rivals, the Death Watch, out of hiding and convince them to try and take over the planet. That attempt would fail thanks to a heroic effort by Satine Kryze and Obi-Wan Kenobi. But being a non-aligned planet during a civil war, Satine Kryze faced a lot of political pressure from both the Republic and the Separatist Alliance and received very little economic support from both sides. Mandalore's surface had been devastated by countless years of constant warfare, which is why Satine chose the route of pacifism in the first place. And so as a result, the planet had very few natural resources and was heavily dependent on imports for basic things like food and water. Due to the Clone Wars' disruption of local supply chains, it became increasingly hard for the Mandalorians to secure enough resources for their people. This would lead to the rise of a powerful black market on the planet, which would attract many unsavory criminal elements to the planet. Towards the end of the war, Satine Kryze's popularity was at an all-time low. Economic hardship due to the war and Satine Kryze's non-aligned stance meant that life was becoming harder and harder for the Mandalorian people. It's a lot harder to be very ideological when you're really hungry and unable to afford basic things. The Death Watch would take advantage of Satine's political weakness at this point and launch a false flag attack using criminal gangs they had allied with. Basically, the Death Watch would pretend to come and save Mandalore from these criminals, and as a result, also overthrow Satine Kryze as an ineffective ruler of Mandalore. Shortly after the Death Watch took over, their leader would be defeated by the former Sith assassin Maul, who would take over the planet instead. Mandalore would suffer greatly for the rest of the war under Maul's rule, until finally Bo-Katan Kryze would join forces with the Jedi-led Republic invasion force and retake the planet. Bo-Katan's reign as regent would be seen as illegitimate by many Mandalorians and would lead to a lot more hardship as a result. This family is really well-meaning, but the results of their leadership over the years has led to nothing but disaster for the Mandalorian people. See, the real problem with monarchs is that they're given authority because of their position rather than because they were elected into that position. Or in even an elected monarch's case, the royal trappings of leadership are designed to falsely make us believe that these people are more competent than we are. And I think it's something that is just completely unnecessary in a representative democracy. I mean, these systems are built in a way so that things are as transparent as possible, and checks and balances are naturally built into place so you don't have to just believe that your ruler is divine and trust whatever they do. Well, guys, that is my analysis of these 5 monarchs. Let me know in the comment section below what you think, and if I've missed any other monarchs who are responsible for the downfall of their planet and people. And as usual, thanks for joining us today. My name is Alan, reminding you that my allegiance is to the Republic, to democracy.